Okay, welcome on my newest video. In this video I want to tell something about difference between the Tayuhan keris, so the holy keris, and the Ageman keris. Ageman keris, I've got my 5 most beautiful Ageman keris over here. And the Ageman keris is the keris that you wear. And if you use a keris, let me open the box. Oh, I closed it just a bit. And if you use a keris, you can see on the keris that it has been used. Well, everybody knows that because of Groneman, a lot of really made keris, but without an energy, came to Holland, let's say 150 years ago. And most of the keris, they have the most beautiful craftsmanships. They're made for an example of old keris, and they have never been worn. Well, for the people who know, if you put the keris in your costume, then it means that especially where you slide it into your costume, you can see some traces over here that this has really been used. Well, these are 2 very beautiful pusaka of mine. Female keris, male keris. This has a very old blade, Segalu, you know, with a pessi on that strange place of the pessi, you know. It's Medeiros. My grandfather was Medeiros, coming from the palace of Sumeneb, but he was Widono at Situbondo, Prajekan. So very beautiful keris. You wear them with you, so other people, it's very important that other people can see who you are. Now this is also very special keris. And it has a topping on. And keris like this, the beautiful Candide over here, you can see it's also East Java. It looks like Solo, but it's not Solo, you know, it's East Java. And you only get this keris when you had a special fight during the war. Then you're going to be decorated like an army cross. In Indonesia at that time you got a keris with a topping on, and it means, you can see it has really been worn. This is a real one. It was inside of the costume. You can see a little bit of silver work here coming off. And well, my grandmother, Raden Ayu Siti Sutari. So my grandfather is Raden Mas Secot de Rejo, and Siti Sutari, Siti means daughter of the Sultan. She came from Yogyakarta. Now this is very interesting. You can see this is a real keris from the palace. And all keris from the palace, they have got some kind of color on the pendok. Most of them you see with red pendok. Red pendok can only be worn by the king. So it's always a replication. It's not real. Because believe me, if a king gives his keris away or sells his keris, it's going to be one of his family members, and I'm sorry, he will not go for the money. This is also very interesting. There's a very old blade. You can see the drawing. So it was somebody who belonged to the palace. A lot of Medeiros people, they were officers in the guards, and you can see on the grip that it's East Java, made out of the wood and technique, as what you can see for the keris from Yogyakarta. Now these are my most beautiful Ageman keris, the costume keris. Most of the time they don't have an energy. The real keris with an energy are the Tayuhan keris, and these are my 5. No, I will not say favorite, because I don't want to insult one of the Chris. For me, these things are living. For me, this is not dead. This is living for me. And that's the first thing you have to believe in Ageman, Hinduism, Buddhism, Muslim, about the Wali Sangha, what they left. If you do not believe, nothing will happen. Well, these are 5 Chris I selected as Tayuhan Chris. This is a very old one. First of all, you can see that most of the Chris are very dry, not soaking in oil. Well, the spirit of the Chris is inside of the veins of the metal. So it means that little spaces, that's where the spirit of the Chris is. So if you close it up with oil, the Chris cannot breathe and the spirit will leave the Chris. It will not sleep, it will leave. Quite simple. So keep your Chris dry, keep it very dry, because if you keep them dry, the oil is only for the smell. And if you keep it dry, the spirit of the Chris will stay there. Now, well, this is a very old Majapahit blade. And this is a very good example on how a real Ageman Chris look like. They're gray, you don't see black. You know why you don't see black? Well, the Empu didn't use iron, because if you turn this around and then you can see the core, the center of the Chris, then you can see that there is black. You see? There is black on it. But not on the palmar, because the palmar is not meant to be contrasting. This is a Tayuhan Chris, this is a holy Chris, so he used holy iron and not iron to make the Chris look beautifully black and white. So if I turn it around, you only see a gray blade. Well, this is a very nice Chris, because this is a very old sheet, and this is how the old sheet look like. I don't know, recently somebody asked me, how long does a Chris last? The sarong, and I told them I still got Chris in their original sarong, because real Chris, you don't dispose them like that. No, you keep them in singap. This Chris is always closed. I put them on a high place. You don't need them, you don't need to talk to them. He is there when I need him. So this is the original sheet. This is also the type. This is how old sarong look like. This is what old sarong look like, And this is the old type. And you can see if I go closer that this is original, This is really, really, really nice. So you've got old sheet. Why people say it doesn't last, that is because they want to believe that their falsification is real. But that's not my problem, because I'm not a collector, I believe in the Chris. I believe in the energy of the Chris. Well, you can see that, how do you recognize a real Tayuhan Chris? First of all, a lot of wood with black pieces of, it's not painted, it's inside of the wood. And if you see a Chris with those black spots like this, or this, or this, then you can almost be sure that it's a Tayuhan Chris. That's a real Chris with the energy. If you look at, for instance, the pendok, it's very simple, it's nothing. But it doesn't need much, because you always store them in a closed place, on the highest place of your house. And if you compare this one with this one, what is also real Yogyakarta, don't forget, people would say this is probably Sumatra, Lampung or whatever. No, this is real Sumatra. And look at the slorok, what is made out of gold. Look how beautiful this is made. If you compare it with this, it's quite simple, because a Tayuhan Chris, you don't wear it, but Tayuhan Chris, you put them in a high place. Now this is a very special Chris too. This is a holy Chris. This is old. You know, old keris are not washed with barangan because they were not used to be washed with barangan. Again, if you look here, you can see that it has a little bit black over here, you see. In the center is still gray because he used holy iron for this and not contrasting iron for beautiful palmer. This is also very interesting. You see this sign here? That's a lam alif. Lam alif is for health. And you see a lot of symbols over here on the blade, carved on the blade. This is also very holy keris. Real Tayuhan keris. You see, so these are 5 Tayuhan keris. Tayuhan keris, you do not use them, you do not display them. You keep them in a singap, you know, a keris bag like this. And you keep them on a high place because you can get ill. If you don't put them on a high place, you're going to get some headache. Very holy keris. They're gray. They don't have that beautiful palmer. And of course you can wash them, but if you wash them longer than 15 minutes, that's what, if you look the video from the museum, Pusaka Museum in Jakarta, then the curator of the museum is explaining also in a video about how to wash a keris. And he's very clear, 15 minutes. If you got a real holy keris, because the spirit will go inside of the veins of the keris in that air. So do not close it off with oil. Do not wash them longer than 50 minutes. And I spoke to him. And if you ask him, okay, but what if you wash them for 50 minutes and the palmer is not good enough? The answer is quite simple. Use the Asian approach. Wait for 210 days and wash them again. It's that simple. Just be patient. And don't forget, the keris is not about palmer, dapper. The keris is accepted by UNESCO as intangible heritage. So the things you do not see. So it's about the spirit, it's about the tradition. So we have to keep the tradition of the keris alive, because that's how the keris is protected by UNESCO, you know. Now these are my most interesting, not beautiful, interesting keris Ageman and keris Tayuhan.